Hello, BookTube. Well, ordinarily in this spot, on this day, you would see Epic Comic Book Wednesday, a collaboration between Michael K. Vaughan and myself. But I don't know if you've noticed from his videos, or rather from the lack of his videos, that he's been really busy lately and has not had an opportunity to make videos. And one of the things that went on the chopping block was Epic Comic Book Wednesday. With any luck, it will return next week. But I didn't want to let the occasion go without talking about comics at least a little. The reason that we settled on Wednesday for Epic Comic Book Wednesday is because right now, uh, new comic books come out on Wednesday, and that used to be a big deal. That day has changed. I'm not even 100% sure. I think it's Wednesday. That day, I remember forever and ever it was Friday, and then it was Thursday for a long time. But that used to be a big deal for me when I was in the country, when I wasn't traveling. That was a big deal to go and get the latest issues of comic book runs that I was following and just sit back and enjoy them. Uh, it hasn't been a big deal like that for a long time, but I think about it still. It's still a reflex of mine. It can't be as big a deal anymore because it used to be that I would go to the dry goods store or the spinner rack at the drugstore or whatever when the new comics were refreshed. Usually, if I went there often enough, I would get to know the person involved. In one particular case, one particular dry goods store, the guy just told me, "Look, why don't you tell me what I should do here? I don't know what any of this stuff is." And I told him, "Well, I'll gladly tell you, and not only that, I'll increase the sales of this particular part of your ledger by a huge amount. You're just picking blind. I can tell you're just picking blind." Well, that's not suiting your audience. Your audience is coming in looking for anything they're willing to buy, and they have the coins to do it. But you're presenting them with True Love or Sergeant Bilko or whatever, just because you happen to, because the guy before you did it, or because you happen to recognize the name. No, no. You show me your order form, and I will guarantee that you do well, that this section does well. And we had a blast. For years and years, we had a blast. I proved that I was right. And that was so much fun because you would go in with, I don't even know, a chunk, not a big chunk, but a chunk of your spending money for that week. And you would come out with a little stack of comic books that you would be able to, the latest in storylines that you're following, maybe something new that you're trying. You can't do that anymore. An individual comic book is $5. That was a whole month's worth of comics. So now they're $5. So you can't just go in and get everything that's new. At least I don't know of anybody who does. But I did come across a first issue today, a first issue that came out, I think, today, delivered to me by my surly houseboy, and I thought, well, it's a $5 collar comic book. It's from Marvel Comics, which is a bit of a worry for me because Marvel Comics is completely ideologically captured, and that's guarantees that your reading experience will be poor. The thing that saved it as a gamble for me was that I don't go into comic books for the reading experience. I know I quote them all the time on Epic Comic Book Wednesday, but I go into them for the artwork. If the reading experience is good in the meantime, so much the better. A gravy on top. But I will definitely look at something if it is an artist that I really like. I'll run the risk of dealing with the ideological capture. By ideological capture, I mean that Marvel Comics is run from the top down by far left, alt left, weird, Instagram addicted ideologues who have a number of different hang-ups, a small number of different tenets of their religious beliefs that they don't care about the comics that they've co-opted, but they want to use those comics as a vessel to get those tenets out into the world. And there are very few of them. All white people are evil, or bad, or lame. No white person is ever heroic and strong. Never. That is never true. No man who is white is ever heroic or strong. He can be evil. He can be effectively evil, or he can be pathetic, but he can't be heroic and strong. That absolutely cannot happen. Also, these ideologues reflect not what Stan Lee referred to as the world outside your window, but rather the world outside their own window. And the world outside their own window is 70% trans. 70% of people are trans. And a full 90 to 93 or 4% of people are gay. There are almost no heterosexual people, and the heterosexual people in the comics that they create very much act as their stupid, insulting version of what a gay person would act like. So it's effectively a clean sweep. Some Marvel knows that this is a loser. This drives away fans. They hate being manipulated like this. They hate the sneering condescension and outright contempt of these creators on social media. They hate it all. So when they see that a new creative team is gaying up their characters, changing 60 years of continuity, they just leave. They just all right. I've been buying, Fantastic Four forever, but I'm not going to buy them anymore. I'm not. It's not like I'm going to wait out a bad creative team. You have actually severed me from this habit. I don't think the people at Marvel Comics realize that. I don't think they realize the long-term effect of what they're doing. Uh, but nevertheless, it is happening. I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, it is happening. All of us, longtime comic book fans, have been familiar with the experience of you're reading a book and then the creative team changes and you don't like it. So you maybe stop reading it, but you are always out on the periphery. And you're always intending to come back. You know perfectly well that the creative team will either change or you'll get used to them or uh, some combination of the two. But you're not saying, all right, I'm done with this. Fans by the hundreds of thousands for Marvel Comics have said, I'm done with this. You could bring back Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and I wouldn't buy another Marvel comic anyway. That's in no danger of happening. Instead, Marvel Comics have been regularly, just predictably, ideologically captured. So people have got to be either gay or so-called acting gay. They aren't acting gay; they're acting stereotype. But these creators don't care. They want heads on walls. That's all. The characters have to be ineffective. The heroes have to be ineffective. Most of these creators have said on social media at one point or another that if they had their druthers, their superheroes would never even punch anybody. It would just be talk. Also, a complete obsession with food. I don't know where that comes from. I don't understand that at all. But it has been true now for 10 years. A complete obsession with food. Pages and pages devoted to food. To characters talking about food. To characters obsessing about food. I don't get it. I don't understand it at all, but it's unmistakable. It's so unmistakable that it has become an identifying mark of these things. And knowing that that's true, if my surly houseboy were going to get me a comic book when he's out and about, well, it probably would be a DC comic book, the home of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. Maybe a tad less ideologically captured. It wouldn't be a Marvel comic, unless there was some overarching reason, like what would be a reason? Well, there was a reason. A few years ago, Marvel got the franchise to Robert E. Howard, to Conan and Kull. So there were first issues of Conan. So even though it's Marvel, I was still going to get those. If Marvel Comics were somewhere down the line, Michael K. Vaughan would know this better than I would, if they were somewhere down the line to get an Edgar Rice Burroughs franchise so they could do John Carter of Mars, well, I would probably go and buy that. But otherwise, I wouldn't rush out to do it. Marvel is a lost cause. They in order for them to change what they're doing so that it's not religious browbeating, they would have to fire the whole staff, just virtually everybody. They would have to fire certainly every writer and editor. I don't know about the artists, but they have to fire every writer and editor. And I mean walk them out of the building. I mean not you're on thin ice, tell a traditional story, we want to win these people back, not anything like, because they won't do it. They won't do it. If you make them do something like that, they will intentionally work in their messages subliminally. Fans will notice it immediately. Your editor will storm into your little open office cubicle and say, I told you not to do anything like this. You didn't do it explicitly. Here it is, and a million fans are pointing it out. That's what you're going to get. If you try to work with them, that's what you're going to get. You have to fire them, block them from your social media, and walk them out of the building. And Marvel's never going to do that. I don't know why. Marvel would rather die as a company. They are going to die as a company rather than change this. They know exactly what they could do to win back however many of those old-time fans can be won back. If you don't win them back, you don't have a business. And they know that. They know that. I think the ideology means more to them than their company's survival, which is really, really frightening. But it is Epic Comic Book Wednesday, and there was a new first issue today and my silly houseboy bought it to me, so I thought I would review it for you. And it's this. It's Spectacular Spider-Men #1. Uh, the plural being because we have Peter Parker Spider-Man, which would be familiar to all of you, staple Marvel character, forever and ever, Marvel's flagship character, in this particular instance with no webbing under the arms, and Miles Morales, another Spider-Man. Doesn't have a different name, different code name. He has a slightly different costume, but he doesn't have a different code name. And he has close, similar powers. And he also will be familiar to a lot of you from one of the greatest superhero movies ever made, an animated movie, in which the Spider-Man involved is Miles Morales. There are plenty of other Spider-Men, including Peter Parker, but he's the star. And it's terrific. If you haven't seen it, Into the Spider-Verse is just incredible. It's an incredible movie. So both of these Spider-Men will be familiar to you. I confess that I'm just old enough to be bothered by this. I don't like the fact that there are two Spider-Men in the Marvel Universe, any more than I like the fact that apparently there are two Supermen in the DC Universe. Superman, Clark Kent, the first and best superhero of them all, and apparently his teenage son, his extremely gay teenage son, is also called Superman. So if they were both putting out a building fire and somebody yelled out Superman, they'd both turn around. I don't like that. I confess that I don't like that. I don't like multiple characters. I don't like there being more than one Thor, more than one Iron Man, more than one Hulk. Right now, if I gather correctly from Marvel continuity, there's a double for virtually every character. I wish that weren't true, but I can't object to Miles Morales as a character. He's partially okay as a character. He's certainly good in that movie. I don't think I've ever read a Miles Morales comic book. I've read comics where he guest stars, and I don't know that I would call him the guest star here. This is clearly meant to be a kind of generational sibling buddy comic. It's clearly meant to be lighthearted. But here, Peter Parker is an older, more seasoned Spider-Man, and Miles Morales is younger, drawn smaller, and they are teaming up. And I guess that's going to be true for the whole of the run of this comic. It's not going to last long. It's going to last about a year. Marvel can't field a comic that lasts for very long, even if it's Spider-Man. Maybe if it's Spider-Man, it might last a little while longer. But they've driven away their fan base. So every comic book that they produce that has a #1 issue has pretty much got to be sort of under the table, a limited series. So pretty much it does. But I think the reason why I have this issue is for the artwork. The artwork is by Humberto Ramos, who I love. I love his artwork. Even though it's weird and cartoony, I love it. And I always have. I've loved watching his artwork change and grow over time. I know that that's not true of everybody. A lot of comic book fans don't like his artwork. A lot of them are turned off by the cartoony parts. Like, well, we don't have to go any further than this cover. This leg is longer than Spider-Man's body. This leg is as long as Miles Morales' whole body. That is downright strange. But you just have to get used. It's especially strange since the rest of the proportions aren't as bad. You just have to get used to it. That's all. Humberto Ramos has been in the game for a long time. This is an Humberto Ramos cover. I don't know much about Marvel's in-house continuity. So, do they have multiple universes at this point? Is there such a thing as the normal Marvel universe where Peter Parker is Spider-Man and that's that? When I saw this cover, the very first thing I noticed was not the 6 foot long leg. The very first thing I noticed was a detail from the 1980s. Streetlights don't look like that anymore, and they haven't in a long, long, long time. but we get artwork, Humberto Ramos artwork. Now, if you don't like this kind of angular, weird, quippy, cartoony thing, see how skinny the arms are? And if you don't like that, then you're not going to like the artwork in this issue. I love Humberto Ramos' artwork, and that was the reason for the issue. And you can see, first of all, the writer here is Greg Weisman, and he starts off in medias res, which is a high school English teacher for in the middle of things. You're going to find out. I wish that Greg Weisman had consulted with me before he did that, because this is not in medias res. This is not. This issue is told in bracketed time frames. then and now, then and now. And in the context of this issue, this is not in medias res. This is now. Maybe he doesn't know what it means. But we've got Miles Morales and Peter Parker, two Spider-Men, on the campus of Empire State University, where Peter Parker went to college, facing a monster. We get a nice big splash page. They're facing the monster. See, I want to show you this. I want to lead up to my complaints. They have gone to Empire State University at night, and they are facing a monster. You get a double page spread as soon as you open the book, and the monster will be immediately visually familiar to any reader, any longtime reader of Spider-Man. That is the monster right there. It appears to be 10 feet tall. It has backward bending knees and huge splayed, clawed legs, a gigantic fanged mouth with ears. But nevertheless, longtime Spider-Man fans will look at that and say, oh, that's the Jackal. A long time ago, there was an ill-advised comic book story in the 70s in which Peter Parker's dead girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, is cloned and brought back to life by a science professor named Professor Miles Warren, who, when he's not being a gray, middle-aged science professor, is a costume bad guy called the Jackal. It leads to a much maligned and justly maligned Spider-Man story in which there's a clone. But the Jackal was still a pretty good villain, pretty distinctive villain, and he only vaguely looked like that. He wasn't a towering monster. But Miles Morales and Peter Parker are swinging to attack this monster when we shift time period to then. And we get them cavorting through the skyline of New York. Again, you're either going to like this kind of thing. You're either going to like that or you're not. They're cavorting through the sky, and they're talking about a plan. Peter Parker's come up with a plan that is rather good. I don't think I've ever read anything by Greg Weisman as a comic book artist or a comic book writer. But the plan that Peter Parker comes up with is kind of good. It has potential. He proposes to Miles Morales that they get together once a week just to talk and hang out as friends. Not in costume, not fighting crime, just as friends. He thinks that it would be very grounding for them. The dialogue here, that premise is good, but the dialogue is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Downright weird. Like, for instance, Peter Parker, in this continuity, Peter Parker's he's probably got, time moves differently in comic books than it does in the real world, but I think it would be safe to say that Peter Parker has 10 years on Miles Morales, maybe a little more than that. They're not anywhere near the same age. Miles Morales is underage. He's a teenager. Peter Parker has been to college. He has been all over the galaxy. So he's about 10 years older. And yet, even though that's true, he says, we just hang out like normal folk, shoot the breeze, peek in on each other's lives. Think of it as a weekly reality check, a mental health prophylactic. I think enough said. Stan Lee's enough said is enough for that. They agree. The writing is dodgy, but they do agree, finally, that it would be a good idea, that they might both enjoy it. And then we move back to now. Notice we're in now. We're not in medias res. We're in now, where Miles Morales and Peter Parker are webbing this gigantic creature with these huge splayed legs and the backward bending knees and the gigantic claws and the tongue lashing out of a gigantic fanged mouth. All of that is going to be important in just a minute. They're webbing this thing, and it is tearing apart the webbing like cotton candy. They're also bantering with each other. They're on a college campus at night. There's absolutely nobody around. No one here at all. It's just them. I don't know if that means that Humberto Ramos was not paid for the backgrounds, or I don't know. Is it during COVID in this galaxy? But we shift again. The scene shifts a few times here. I think probably because Weisman is trying to lay the groundwork for a much longer story. A lot of writers are writing for the trade paperbacks. They're no longer writing for the individual issues. But we get a scene in a courtroom. I have no idea who this guy is. I have no idea what's going on here at all. Is he maybe a recurring character that Weisman likes? That maybe he's used in other books? I've noticed that Marvel has an almost congenital inability to actually do a first issue that brings new readers on board. Maybe this is just another example of that. I have no idea why I saw this scene at all. So, and I didn't have to worry about it for long because then we move on. We move back to our characters at Empire State University, in completely deserted, fighting this character at night. I want to point out the reason I pointed out all those features of the Jackal is because Peter Parker, with a huge look at this thing, with a huge amount of experience, he has been fighting bad guys for his whole adult life. He pulls at the lips of this thing, telling Miles Warren to take the mask off. The thing is 10 feet tall. Its knees bend backwards. It has gigantic fangs and claws. It is obviously not a mask. What on earth? What on earth? And then we get a scene that I, of course, noticed because I take these things seriously. I know that seems dumb, but I've been reading comics my whole life. I take them seriously. This gigantic, monstrous jackal, 10 feet tall, roaring, gigantic pavement clawing talons, obviously not a man in a mask. What on earth? What on earth? It grabs Spider-Man. It's able to grab Spider-Man. He doesn't see that the grab is coming, and hurls him at great speed into this big stone sign, "Welcome to Empire State University." Spider-Man smashes it to rubble. He's hurled to rubble against that sign. The reason I point that out is because Spider-Man is super strong. He can lift 8 to 10 tons. But he doesn't have an accelerated healing factor, and he's not invulnerable. If you shoot him, then you've shot somebody. If you punch him, he'll bruise. And if you throw him at 30 miles an hour into a big stone sign like that, he can't spin out of the way, he can't protect himself, that's going to knock him unconscious and put him in the hospital. Might not stay in the hospital for long, but he's not just going to get up and bounce back from that unless you, as Greg Weisman, don't really care whether you're getting his powers right or not. I don't really care. I'm more interested in the jokes. Anyway, I'm reading that panel, and I'm thinking, A, Spider-Man would not think this is a mask. This is obviously not a mask. The kid, Miles Morales, points that out, says obviously it's not a mask. And B, this would incapacitate Spider-Man. He would be out of this fight, so maybe he will be. I don't know, because we shift scenes again to then, where Peter Parker and Miles Morales are doing what they said. They have met during the day to go to a coffee shop. And my own spider sense should have been tingling at that point, because that's what these writers care about. That's what ideological writers care about. They care about down with the patriarchy and food. And it turns out, I still can't believe this. I read this hours ago. There are 2 plot lines in this issue. In this first issue of Spectacular Spider-Man, there are 2 plot lines. One involves our heroes fighting the Jackal, and the other involves food. One half of the issue is Peter Parker and Miles Morales in this coffee house, with Peter Parker ordering a drink and going on and on and on and on about that drink, and about the fact that he likes the idea that you get to become so well known in your coffee spot that they not only know you by name, but they know your signature drink. A medium iced half and half latte with a shot of espresso and a dash of cinnamon. This thing is 20 pages long, and I'm not exaggerating. 10 pages are devoted to this. Half of this issue is a medium iced half and half latte with a shot of espresso and a dash of cinnamon. It goes on and on and on, with Peter saying, I really want to be a regular in this spot. Then the action shifts back to the fight. Spider-Man is not offended. He's not bothered at all. He's right back in the fight against this creature, which is getting bigger. Your eyes are not deceiving you. It's getting bigger as they fight. They're not noticing that, and the sad reality here is that I don't think Humberto Ramos noticed it either. It's not part of the plot. It just so happens that it's happening. Then we cut back to the diner, back to the coffee shop, where Professor Miles' brother is ordering a coffee. He just happens to show up there. It's just random chance. Yeah, the brother of the guy that is allegedly the monster later in the issue, shows up in the coffee shop. And so we get introduced to him. And then we cut back to the fight, where this thing is now not only 20 feet tall, but shaggy, long hair, where it didn't have that before. And Spider-Man and Miles Morales are still fighting it. Notice there's still anybody around. It's not a question of this thing roaring at them anymore. It's now breaking. It broke that stone sign for Empire State. It's now smashing through walls. No police, no firemen, no students. Then we get another scene shift to a stage play. An actor singing lyrics on stage and then crying because the audience loves him. And I'm going to get back to this. This happens 3 times. We'll get to the next one, but I'm going to get back to these one-page diversions from the 2 main plot lines, which are monster and food. We'll get back to them at the end. We'll do the 3rd one, then we'll get back to them. Then we get this double page, where I love Humberto Ramos's artwork. Here he is not dealing with the gutter to split the action. Instead, we get rows of panels across 2 whole pages. It's lovely. It's really wonderfully done. One thing you can't stop from noticing, since this fight is now on its 10th page, you can't help but notice that these 2 Spider-Men are completely ineffective. They don't have the slightest ability to even slow this thing down. Why? Why don't they? Could be because neither one of them is punching it, or kicking it, or landing on it. They're not doing anything but trying to slow it down. They're webbing it constantly, but they're not attacking it. It's attacking them, but they're not attacking it. No physical force is being used on this thing. You might think, okay, that's a little odd. Surely the easiest way to slow this thing down would be for one Spider-Man to distract it, while the other Spider-Man slams it in the head with both legs. They're conspicuously not doing that, and I have a feeling that's because this writer is an alt-left zealot who's thinking the hated quasi-fascist man-babies who buy these things love physical violence, but we're better, so we won't do that. Then we break from the fight to our 3rd standalone scene change. So we saw the guy in the courtroom, then the guy in the courtroom, the guy on the stage, and now we get our 3rd and final one. And it's gay. I mean, it's 2 women meeting in Venice and kissing each other. Not because any of this is going to be important to the plot. Maybe Greg Weisman will make something involving one of these characters important to the plot. The importance of this scene right here is to make your imagined enemies stew with outrage. This is fan baiting. This is meant to tell the diehard readers of Spider-Man, we really, really hate you. And we're going to do what we can to make you just throw this book down in outrage. That's what we want to do. We want you to hate this book. And they're wrong. They're wrong right down the board. Sure, there are some neck-bearded quasi-fascists out there who hate gay people. Sure, there are some. 90% of the people, 95% of the people who are hating this issue are not hating it for this page. They're hating it for the rest of it, for the superhero stuff that you're doing poorly. And you don't see that, and you never have. Marvel zealots never, ever have. We cut back to the fight. Spider-Man and Miles Morales have been thrown to the ground when the monster walks up and grabs Spider-Man's leg and slams him into the ground at 90 miles an hour. Why does the monster do that? Well, because something seems to be missing here. And maybe, for all I know, maybe it is missing. I haven't followed Spider-Man continuity for very long. It could be that there's something missing here. There's something very much missing here. You don't have to know much about Spider-Man to already be thinking, well, what about... We'll get to it. We're about to get to it. But first, we move back to the coffee shop. And a whole page of Peter Parker ordering his signature drink. A whole page of it. Did you forget what it was? A medium iced half and half latte with a shot of espresso and a dash of cinnamon? Did you forget? Because you get reminded over and over and over again. Finally, the barista remembers the order and remembers Peter's name, and he is so happy. We get a panel of him holding his drink. We get a panel of him drinking his drink. We get a panel of him celebrating drinking his drink. And then the monster runs by. And this is where we come right back to the original panel. This is a smaller version of the big double page spread. We come right back to the present time of the comic. So now's a good time to talk about a few things. One, I mentioned it already. I'll mention it again. I do not understand this weird, fetishistic concentration on food. This is the whole issue. This is the pinnacle of the issue as far as Peter Parker is concerned. Also, who is that? What kind of a simp facial expression is that? Peter Parker is not acting childish in this issue. He's acting mentally retarded. That's one thing. Another thing, the monster runs right by the window. If it didn't, would Peter Parker and Miles Morales have even known? Would the brother of the guy who looks a lot like this monster right there in the coffee shop, would they have even known? All these coincidences piled on top of each other. Two things I want you to notice about the monster running by the coffee shop. One, where is Peter Parker's spider sense? How was that monster able to grab him, not once but twice, in the middle of combat? Spider sense is supposed to protect him from that. And why didn't his spider sense go off when this thing was running 10 feet away from him down the street? Does Peter Parker in this current continuity of Marvel Comics not have a spider sense? Does Miles Morales not have a spider sense? It doesn't go off for either one of them. And third, take a good look at that panel. Yup, it's daylight outside. It is not nighttime. It is not the nighttime in which these characters are facing off against this monster. And the two dovetail perfectly into each other. There is no gap of time. It's just a mistake. That's all. It's not as big a mistake as whatever this is. I don't know what that is. It's not as big a mistake as an author who simply cannot stop talking about food. But then we get back to the fight. Look at these two panels. First of all, I love them because of the artwork. But look how ineffective these two characters are. This monster is ripping through their spider webbing, and they can see that it is. They just keep trying it. Until finally, they use a truckload of webbing, just a truckload of it, to immobilize the thing. As a way to deal with this gigantic, rampaging monster that does not involve physical force. And then we get the denouement. Then we get the fallout. The monster is tranquilized, and I guess sent away to some sort of supervillain penitentiary or whatever. Too bad Spider-Man didn't have an ability to knock it unconscious. He did, of course, have an ability to knock it unconscious, and so did Miles Morales. They don't use it, though. They conspicuously don't use it. And there's a lab. Old Professor Miles Warren's lab had this creature inside a stasis tube, and it escaped. And somehow it escaped, and that's why it went on a rampage. But in the process, they encounter a desiccated corpse. Very difficult to make out what the image is here, or the proportions. Where is Miles Morales in this picture compared to Spider-Man or these two guys? I like Humberto Ramos' artwork, but it can sometimes be like this, just a puzzle. Where is he in connection to them? Is he high above them? Because if that's true, why doesn't this look right? His head and Spider-Man's are the same size. They wouldn't be the same size if they're 10 feet away from each other. But I think it's pretty easy to tell from whatever this is what is coming. And I think what's coming is a return of the Jackal, the actual Jackal, not this irradiated monster. And that is the Spectacular Spider-Man #1. And I'm going to have to, for my two speculations, one, that the villain of this piece is going to be the actual original Jackal back from the dead. And two, that this writer, this ideologue, does not want his superheroes to use physical force to solve their problems. Both of those are hypotheses of mine, and the only way that I would be able to know whether or not I'm right about either one of them would be to get Spectacular Spider-Man #2. And I really don't think I'm going to do that. I really don't. I don't think I could take another... this is $5. That means $2.50 worth of this book was characters obsessing about food. I don't think I could do that a second issue in a row. So I'm just going to have to guess or maybe watch in case anybody's reviewing these things. I don't know. Does YouTube have people who do individual single issue reviews of comics? I don't know. If you know of any channel like that, maybe maybe I'm familiar with the cheerleading channels, like Near Mint Comics and a couple of others. I'm familiar with them where if they don't want to cut off the gravy train of free access and free supplies, so they're not going to bash anything. Unless maybe you know of some channels like that do. I Are there like individual, like what we do here, like completely individual, completely non-sponsored, unvarnished reviews of individual comic books? Do those channels exist? I don't know whether they do or not. If they do, then maybe I could use them to keep up with how Spectacular Spider-Man is going on. But there was nothing in this first issue that made me want to buy a second issue. Our characters fight a gigantic monster pointlessly and almost ineffectively, as it does an enormous amount of damage to a campus of a city college. There are never any people around. There are never any stakes. And then it's over. And we're left with a little mystery. So we will see. I doubt very much that I will be reading issue number 2, but I wanted to talk about comics today just somehow. And we'll hope that Epic Comic Book Wednesday is back next week. So I'll wrap this up for now. That was Spectacular Spider-Man number 1, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.